Okay. Well, thanks, Tim, and thank you everyone for being here. And Eddie, thanks for being here to share your knowledge.
Thanks
and
for being here with me.
Eddie is one of my teachers, and I revere all his teachings. And I've been a practitioner of yoga for several decades, but reading this book actually gave me a new practice, even though I'm doing the same asanas. Just reading the book changed the way I do them.
Awesome,
so
thank
you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
And we have about 50 minutes right now to solve the mystery of our existence. So we won't waste any time. Yoga is the science of consciousness, and the only science of consciousness. So, Eddie, I'm maybe a decade and a half older than you. So when I came to this country, the Vietnam War was coming to an end. The plays on Broadway were Hair and Oh Calcutta. Women were burning their bras in Harvard Square, and the women's movement was coming on. Greenpeace was there. We thought the world was changing, that soon everybody would be enlightened. Yoga would be the only science.
We had the Aquarian age, we
and
had the new paradigm shifts.
Age.
Where were they?
But now we regressed even 50 years. So your book is very timely. Can you share in a few minutes, how you got to be the yoga master you are? Because you're a nice New York City boy.
Yep. I don't know about the nice part, but I'm a New York City boy, that's for sure. And definitely don't know about the yoga master part, but I was at a summer camp when I was about 15 or so, and they had yoga as one of the offerings, and so I did the 1 or 2 weeks of yoga. And at the end of every class, we did the Shavasana, or the deep relaxation. And in that relaxation, I would go into absolute blank void, and it sort of started answering questions for me, or giving me an inkling of my existence was maybe something more than I thought it was. And I wanted to practice when I went back home, but I thought that when you went into that deep relaxation state, that there was a secret trick to wake you up. And I thought the yoga teacher knew the trick to wake us up out of the Shavasana, and that if they didn't use that trick to wake us up, we would just stay in the void forever. And I thought, what if I practiced yoga and I was like lying on my floor at home, and my parents came in, or my mom came in and saw me lying there in like this death state and didn't know how to wake me up? Would I disappear forever? So I didn't practice when I went home. And then a couple of years later, I found a yoga teacher in Manhattan when I was about 18 or 19. So I was afraid to do it. I thought I would just be swallowed up into the void. Maybe I should have been. Then I could have been enlightened and I'd be done.
So you spent 20 years going back and forth. Eddie is one person who knows Sanskrit better than a lot of Sanskrit scholars I know, and I'm not exaggerating. He's very modest, and he's going to deny that. But you spent 20 years going back and forth. You studied all of yoga and its affiliate disciplines. Just for our audience, define yoga.
Well, yoga has two main meanings. The first is Yujira Yoga, which means yoga is union. And the second was Yujao Samadao, which means yoga is concentration. So yoga as concentration means it's a particular state where the mind becomes absorbed in the thing that it's focusing upon, so much to the point where it takes on the form of what you're meditating on. And in that state, you enter into samadhi, which is union with your higher nature. So it's both concentration as a means to attaining union. And in that union, you are one with everything.
So the word yuj in Sanskrit means union. It's related to the English word yoke. When Jesus Christ in the New Testament says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." I think he's talking about yoga, because yoga is connection to the source of all experience, right?
Yeah.
The source of all experience,
Yeah.
which is consciousness.
Yes.
So Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, today of course people think that's a particular brand of yoga.
Yeah.
But it is Ashtanga Yoga is the original yoga, at least as expounded by Patanjali. When did Patanjali live?
Some people say that he lived about 2,500 years ago. Right now, the leading consensus is he lives somewhere between 200 and 600 AD. In that area. So still a fairly long time
So
ago.
let's just briefly, we have, as I said, 50 minutes to solve the mystery of existence.
And we're halfway there, so we're going to have a lot of time for questions.
Very briefly, let's go over the 8 limbs. I'll say how I understand them.
Okay.
You can expound on them. So the way I understand niyama is observances.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, they're the observances of our interpersonal relationships and how we consciously decide to interact with the people around us. And these are ahimsa, which is kindness, satya, which is honesty, asteya, which means not taking things that belong to others, including their ideas. Brahmacharya is sexual responsibility, and aparigraha is being content with the things that you have and not thinking that by getting more will it add something additional to your sense of self.
That's niyama, observances. Yama, restraints.
Niyama are the restraints, and the restraints are the personal disciplines that we apply to ourselves, including cleanliness of body and mind, contentment, again, with the things we have, tapas, which are spiritual disciplines, or the things we do to apply a little bit of friction within us, because friction leads to transformation. Swadhyaya is the repetition of mantras or study of text, and then Ishvara Pranidhana is surrender to the unknown if you don't believe in God, and surrender to God if you do believe in God.
Okay.
And if you believe in God, surrendering to God is better than surrendering to something else.
Okay. So, you know, as you can see already, there are so many translations and versions of even the 8 limbs. My background with Maharishi, he avoided the word concentration. He said focused awareness because concentration gives you a headache.
Yes.
He also...
I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah. I try not to concentrate as often as possible.
He would also say the yamas and niyamas shouldn't be taken as moral injunctions, but as natural outcomes as you get in touch with your source.
Yeah.
Because imposed morality is jealousy with a halo.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes. No.
Would you
exactly.
agree that the yamas and niyamas are natural consequences of getting in touch with the source?
Yeah, they're the spontaneous expression of your highest self when the filtrations are being cleared away to the side.
Limb number 3, asana, which is usually translated as postures, but the word asana means seat. You're all sitting in asana right now, and as understood in yoga, seats of awareness. So all these different hundreds of asanas are meant to give you an insight into a particular aspect of awareness. Would you explain this a little bit more?
Yes, so the word asana is broken up into 2 parts. The word as means to sit, it's a verbal root, and ana means breath. So in an asana, you're literally sitting with your breath, and when you sit with your breath, you sit in awareness. And so one of the things about the nature of the world and its forms is that forms are changing all the time. One form changes into another, our bodies are decaying, eventually we'll die, we'll turn into something else, perhaps. And the idea within yoga is that even though forms change, the underlying awareness never changes. So you remain present in all the different asanas that you do, and you do many different asanas to understand that even though my body is changing form, my awareness is staying present and not changing.
That's so beautifully said. So again, asana is meant to take you back to the source.
To the source, yeah.
Which is awareness.
Yeah.
Pranayam, and actually Eddie is one of the experts in the world on pranayam. Pranayama, as it's frequently called. There are hundreds of pranayams for all kinds of purposes, to energize the body, to slow down the metabolic rate, to evoke creativity, etc., etc. But you've actually emphasized pranayam even more than asana and meditation recently with your breathing app, etc.
Which you helped out on.
Which I kind of participated in. But explain the whole emphasis on pranayam, which is so effective, so fast, and so immediate, even more so than yoga and meditation, at least from what I've understood from your teachings.
Okay. So pranayama is basically the balancing of the branches of our nervous system. Every time we inhale and exhale, we're affecting different branches, particularly sympathetic and parasympathetic. In our society today, and in societies going back many thousands of years, as soon as society collected in a particular place and started building cities, and they started having problems, and those problems were stressful. That's why yoga was created a long time ago, because there was stress thousands of years ago, just like we have now. So the practice of pranayama and the controlling of breath downregulates the sympathetic response and allows the parasympathetic response to be more present. The sympathetic response is moving towards being in a defensive mode and perceiving everything as a threat, and parasympathetic is when we have rest, digest, repair and restoration, but most importantly, we begin living in a non-defensive state. And in a non-defensive state, we're open to pro-social interaction. We are more open to connecting with ourselves on a deeper level because we don't perceive the things in our own psyche as a threat. So our shadow, for example, we can begin to integrate. And we don't perceive the things in the world around us as a threat either, so we don't act out against things constantly. So that's why it's so important to downregulate the sympathetic to bring us into a non-defensive mode of being.
Openness.
Openness, yeah.
Pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. So right now we're still in the top 5 of the 8 limbs.
Yep.
I've become recently very familiar with the whole language of interoception. So perception is when you see the world outside. Interoception is when you get intimate with your inner world, including the interiority of your body and mind. So say a few words. Do you, first of all, subscribe to this idea that interoception, when we can talk later about what it does to the brain, but is pratyahara in a sense as you withdraw to the senses and you explore the inner world of body, mind and viscera as well?
I definitely think so, primarily because in exteroception, all of our energy is going out through the sense organs. When we're looking at things, listening to things, tasting things, sensing the air change around us, this is all, and that's the word for it, is exteroception, is the contact of our sense organs with the world around us for the sake of perception. When we are engaged in that, our sympathetic nervous system is driving that outflow of perceptive energy, or the metabolic energy used for the sense organs to perceive things. When we begin to be interoceptive and bring our awareness inward to feeling what our bones feel like and sensing the internal organs and the state of our brain and the state of our nervous system and our emotions, this interoception then activates the parasympathetic nervous system and allows that same power of perception rather to move outwardly and lose energy, to move inwardly and gain energy.
So you literally not only inwardly gain energy, but you get knowledge of what is happening inside your body.
You begin to get
a very clear level, more than say I would get out of even a class in anatomy and physiology. I know at the level of feeling and the level of knowing everything that's happening in my body. Now, I have a practice that I do, a form of yoga nidra at night, and I would say yoga nidra is kind of a window into pratyahara. Would you agree that?
Yeah, and I think also, just to follow up on what you're saying, that you speak a lot about listening to the wisdom of your body. And to listen to the wisdom of the body is to practice interoception, to listen to what your body is telling you, about how you feel about something, how you're thinking about something, if something is dangerous, if you should maybe go in a different direction with your life.
Let's try something right now. Close your eyes and just be aware of your body. This is going to last only a few seconds. So be aware of your body. And right now, as you close your eyes and you practice awareness of your body, I think your experience will be there are islands of sensation. There are islands of sensation, intermittent sensations, in a sea of formless being or bliss. Now you can open your eyes. Did you get some hint of what I was trying to suggest? that the only experience when you close your eyes and feel your body is these islands of sensation in a formless sea of being. And this is those islands of sensation are the places where there's entropy. The rest, the formless sea of being, is our true nature. So the ultimate goal of pratyahara would be to not feel your body as a physical entity or even a perceptual experience, but as pure consciousness.
Yeah, as an experience.
As an experience.
Yeah.
As pure consciousness. Your body becomes pure consciousness. So again, that's the fifth limb of Ashtanga Yoga. The sixth is Dharna.
Dharana is from the verbal root dra, which means to place or to hold. And so with Dharana, you're allowing your focused attention or awareness to rest upon a particular point so that your mind begins to unscatter and become collected.
So in a sense, what you were calling concentration or focused awareness, right?
Yeah. I'm just avoiding the word concentration now.
No, that's a beautiful word for some people.
Yeah.
It's just my bias that I had a teacher who said, okay.
Yeah. I'm very fond of biases.
Okay. So that's dharna, and then the last two limbs are dhyan, the flow of dharna, which becomes meditation.
Yeah.
But please say a little bit about it.
Okay, so in quite often in the literature, they give an example that with dharana, or the first step of concentration, it's like if you're pouring water from this vessel out into a glass, and little drops of water will spread out and splatter everywhere. That flow is like a flow of concentration. And a flow of meditation, it's like this is filled with honey or oil, and you're pouring it from here into another cup, and there's no drop spilling anywhere. You have a continuous flow of awareness moving towards the object that you are meditating on.
So you're going from subject-object split to the ultimate unification of subject-object, which is called samadhi, which is transcendence, which is the eighth limb of yoga. So you can see this is a complete science, right? A complete science with only one goal, is to get in touch with the source of all experience, which we call the self. And then we can go later into how that self of the individual is also ultimately, turns out, the self of the universe.
Would you agree that, or not agree, that one of the reasons why yoga is called a science is because, like any scientific endeavor, it's replicable by all the different people who practice it?
I would agree. Now, I happen to be in an ecosystem of scientists where they're very contentious, and of course they're talking now about the science of consciousness. And my only objection to the whole terminology is science is in consciousness. So when we say science of consciousness, we kind of forget
split again.
that we start the split again. So it's the closest thing we can say yoga is the science of consciousness, but science is a system of thought, just like philosophy is a system of thought, or theology is a system of thought, or
thinking is a system of thought.
Yeah, but all the things that we've believed in since humans began to think have evolved from mythology to religion to theology to philosophy and now science, all systems of thought, without recognizing that yoga is actually not a system of thought. Yoga is getting you beyond all systems of thought. So there's a little bit of contention whether we should call it the science of yoga, but it's the closest thing to science, actually, because it transcends all systems of thought. Okay, so those are the 8 limbs of yoga. Now, as I read Eddie's book, and I said, as I read the book, being very familiar with the philosophy, being very familiar with the practice myself, there were insights here that actually influenced my own practice in a very amazing way. So I want to share some of those insights. And I'm going to quote from the book, where you say, what's a correct asana? And Eddie says, when the mind is quiet, the asana is correct.
Yeah, that's something my teacher said.
It's so beautiful. Okay, so if you're straining in the asana, even though it's uncomfortable, in the beginning it is, but when you get to that place where your mind is quiet, then that's the asana for you. Okay, and then as you keep practicing, and you can get to more intense postures, but the goal is the quietening of the mind, which is the whole process of yoga, is to go beyond the mind to the source of the mind. Okay, yoga is taking you to the source of the mind. It's the source of all experience, but also the source of thought. The other thing that Eddie really got me changing my practice is when you spoke about the combination of asana, vinyasa, and what's the third?
Drishti.
And drishti.
Drishti.
So asana is seats of awareness, and vinyasa is the flow from one to the other, and drishti is gaze. And by the way, I've been doing that now, and it's exhilarating. So
Awesome.
Please explain this combination
Okay.
to everyone, because we've all heard these words, vinyasa, right? But how does this combination of drishti, vinyasa, and sthiti is?
Yeah, great. Okay, so first of all, I'm glad that it's working. So this is my biggest success story right here. There are basically three facets that we're working with our whole organism. When we do a practice, we're working with our body, we're working with our nervous system, we're working with the mind. For most of us in our daily life, these three things are going in different directions. So, for example, say, you know, you're catching up on all your social media one night because you're very active and you have 1,000 Facebook messages to reply to and 1 million Instagram direct messages, and you know, you're going through them and your body is saying to you, I'm really tired, I need to go to sleep. And your mind says to you, just answer a few more direct messages. And then your nervous system is stuck in the middle and has to obey what your mind is telling it to do, because the nervous system is following the dictate of the mind and the intention. And then the body is debilitated because of it. So what we want to do in any yoga practice is we want to get the body and the nervous system and the mind all in the same communication system, so they're all agreeing about what should be happening at any given moment. And we also want all of them to come to the same place at the same time. So instead of my mind being here answering my messages and my nervous system struggling to keep up and my body getting really tired, we want everyone to be agreeing and be at the same place at the same time, which is a type of a union. So with the asanas, we are addressing the body. With breathing and the vinyasas within the movement, we're balancing the nervous system. So we establish communication between the body, breath and movement, which is vinyasa. And then with the mind, we establish that agreement of I'm allowing my mind to be present with the confines of my body as I practice. So, for example, there are 9 different drishtis. You asked me about those before. And those are basically looking between the eyebrows, looking at the nose, looking at the navel, looking at your right hand or left hand, and looking at your feet. There's also one antara drishti, which is looking up, which can also be defined as looking inward. So all of these 9 drishtis are basically confined to our body. So now we're using this mental energy to be present with our body rather than present with going off in different directions. And so that's how it all comes together. Was that
Perfect.
too complicated?
No, it's
Okay,
not.
good.
It's beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
So just in my own practice, let's say I'm doing sun salutation, right? All these drishtis come
Yes.
into play. All these drishtis come into play. And as you're practicing sun salutation, you're moving from one posture to the other. You're also focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath. In the in-breath on one pose and the out-breath as you move to the second part of the pose. And at the same time, your drishti is changing. And the complete system of yoga postures, it takes everything into account, right? Sitting postures, twists, standing postures, forward bends, backward bends. And when you combine that shift with the flow of vinyasa at the same time and the drishtis in combination, it changes your practice altogether. You know, one of the things, because I'm such a disciplinarian myself, is I have to do my yoga practice, no matter how busy my day is. But I noticed that I was in a hurry. you know, which is the whole point of, it defeats the whole purpose of yoga. You want to get it over with. But when I started to introduce these three aspects to my practice, I'm not in a hurry anymore.
Amazing.
You know, I want to enjoy every single phase of that.
Beautiful.
And so I want to thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
particular insight in the book.
And you know, let me
And the
just say one
nine
more thing.
drishtis as well.
One thing on that also is, you know, quite often we hear something for the body, something for the mind, something for the nervous system. Actually, we want something to integrate all of those together. And then you can experience the joy of that, of the thing that you're doing.
I can say I'm experiencing the joy.
Yeah, beautiful.
Right now. Thanks to you.
Not thanks to me. Definitely not thanks to me.
Now,
but you're welcome.
The other thing is, you pay a lot of attention to Ujjayi breathing of all the pranayams. Give people a little demonstration, have them participate. In our India trip, you also showed us a little bit of Brahmari. And the reason I'm saying, asking you to give a little demonstration and have them participate in this is, as we get to the Polyvagal Theory, I want to kind of emphasize why this is such a interesting aspect of the whole polyvagal stimulation.
Okay, great. So I'm not going to tell you why we're doing this. I'm going to let you tell them why we're doing this, and you can just trust me for the moment. So if you haven't done this breathing practice before, it's quite simple. We're going to extend your exhale very slightly so you hear a whispering sound. But the way that you're first going to do it is you're going to hold your hand in front of your mouth, pretending that your hand is a mirror, and you're going to exhale out from your mouth, pretending that you're going to fog a mirror, okay? And don't feel like that you should have brushed your teeth before this. It's fine. So go. Can everyone feel your breath on your hand? Yep, do that one more time. Okay, so now you're going to do the same thing, but you're not going to do it through your mouth. You're going to send that same sound through your nose, which is a little bit weird the first time. So inhale through your nose and go. You can put your hand down, Nick, as my brother. Inhale one more time. Can you all hear how you make, like, there's a little compression in the throat and you make a steady, smooth sound? So now what you want to do is you want to make a very gentle sound on your inhale and soften the throat a little and make that same gentle sound as you exhale. And it'll sound kind of like this. Go ahead and try it. Inhale. Okay, so that's the Ujjayi breath. Maybe you figured it out, maybe you didn't. But
by the way, just so I can add a little bit of experience with this, 30 years ago I was working with Olympic marathon runners, and a chiropractor friend of mine said, when you practice Ujjayi breath, it's mainly your diaphragm that's moving. And if you tell these marathon runners to do this while they're running, they'll increase their endurance. And sure enough, you know, it became almost a fad with these guys, that their endurance for running went up like twice.
Wow.
And so that is because you're selectively using your diaphragm while you're running. And also the breathing slows down, so you breathe deeper, oxygenation goes up. So I now do this during my practice of
you should.
Yogasana with the vinyasa.
Yeah.
Okay. Brahmari.
Brahmari, okay, so anytime you eat something really good, can you demonstrate for me what the yummy sound is, like in Young Frankenstein? Exactly. So now just say that for longer. And now make it a little higher pitched. Take a long inhale and say it for as long as you can. This is Brahmari.
Now close your eyes and do it and feel your body. and specially send that vibration to all those islands of discomfort in the ocean of bliss.
Exactly.
Close your eyes, feel your body, and do it. Okay, so now these days everybody's talking about energy medicine, kinesiology, Reiki, you name it. This is the best vibratory energy medicine you can do every day. Feel your body, do a few minutes of Brahmari, send the vibration into these islands of discomfort, and have as your intention the ultimate experience that your body is not physical, but a modified form of consciousness, which is what it is. Now, interestingly, there are over 100 of these pranayams. Can you imagine
thousands.
How impressive, thousands of these pranayams, all with very specific outcomes. We're just touching the surface. Okay, what else did I want to ask you?
Do you want to talk about the science of those pranayamas at all, like what they do to you? Or later?
Yeah, what I thought is let's jump right to the last part of the book.
Okay.
The whole book is fantastic, but chapter 11 goes into science, something that we are both interested in. And I would like to start by saying that in at least the Eastern wisdom traditions, in yoga, your body is a projection of your soul. Your body is, and your mind is a projection of your soul. If by soul we mean core being, core consciousness, which is the confluence of everything that gives you meaning, context, relationship, and your own archetypal stories. This is the product, right? And if you want to know what's happening inside a person's inner life, then all you have to do is look at their eye movements and the clarity of their eyes, their facial expressions. Are they happy? Are they sad? The tone of their voice. Does it feel threatening or loving or kind? Gestures. Are they open or they contracted? And just the whole gestalt of the body language as a combination of eye movements, tone of voice, facial expression, and whether the body is relaxed and open or not. This is a projection of what's happening in your interior life. Now, as I studied this book, and I also came to your conference, and we had this great scientist, Dr. Stephen Borges. He emphasized that this is all influenced by the vagus nerve, the vagal tone of your body. Eddie already spoke about sympathetic nervous system as the inflammatory system, the system that helps you deal with the challenges of the world. And the world right now is inflamed and sympathetic overdrive. And what we need to do is balance that with the parasympathetic nervous system. And it turns out this vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, which has bidirectional traffic. So it goes from your brain and it influences everything that I've spoken of: facial expression, tone of voice, eye movements, heart rate variability, diaphragmatic movement. Then it enters, goes through the diaphragm, goes to all the visceral organs. And so it's the healing nerve of the body. And what we're learning now through the Polyvagal Theory is that the 10th cranial nerve is in fact the healing nerve in our body. And yoga, in every aspect of yoga, stimulates the vagus nerve and selectively its branches. I recently met with the R&D chief of a big pharmaceutical company. He said all our pharmaceutical drugs are now failing and we have to come to a new way to look at how to heal the body. So they are experimenting with something called bioelectrical medicine. And the story, and I'll finish with the story very quickly because I want to hear Eddie. The way it evolved is that the FDA approved vagal stimulation with electrical implants for one disease, intractable epilepsy. So if you put an electrical implant in the vagus nerve and you stimulate it through a device, you could have an iPhone stimulated. It stimulates the vagus nerve and epilepsy patients respond. But what they found was that people who had arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, the arthritis in some cases disappeared. They had asthma, the asthma disappeared. They had cancer and went into remission in some cases. So he and I had this conversation. I said, first of all, you don't need an electrical implant. You can use a magnet, because magnets and electricity is the same thing, and you don't have to be invasive, and then you can do it simply with a handheld device. But I said, yoga stimulates all these different branches anyway. He said, we know that, but how do we make money out of it?
Become
so
a yoga
that's
teacher.
The story, huh?
I said, become a yoga teacher.
Become a yoga teacher and fund the research.
Exactly. It's a very low margin business.
Okay,
don't
now
worry. Don't
talk
become
about
one.
the polyvagal theory. I've given a long introduction, but this is the most interesting science that is now at the cutting edge of where yoga needs to be understood. So explain that.
Okay, the polyvagal theory was proposed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and what he said was that the oldest branch of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is evolutionarily, it's the oldest part of our brain, in the brainstem, about 320 million years old, is made primarily of parasympathetic nerves, about 80% of it, 20% are sympathetic, which means that from the gut going up to the brain, we have this messaging system which is directing 80% of the information up towards the brain, telling the brain to tell the body what to do. And then 20% of that information coming through the vagus nerve is sensory, which is the direction of motor activity. Basically what happens is when the flow of information is interrupted through anxiety or stress or anger, it begins to affect our different physiological systems. And so when the flow of information through the vagus gets, say, impeded or is unable to perform its functions as well as it would like to, the first thing it begins to affect is the heart rate variability, the beat-to-beat difference in the heart rate. And then the heart stops responding to other flows of information like an inhale and an exhale. So when we inhale, the heart should speed up. When we exhale, the heart should slow down.
That's why the heart rate variability is the best way to measure whether you're stressed or whether you're in flow.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but when we're stressed out, the breath pattern, or when we have a cardiovascular problem, the breath pattern is not going to change the heart rate variability. Even if you're stressed, you can feel that your heart rate doesn't change, even when you try to calm down. Another thing that will happen with information flows being impeded are digestive problems. Problems with secretion of insulin from the pancreas, which can lead to diabetes, and then the other cancer problems and things like that you spoke about. These are all inflammatory things because one thing the vagus does is it controls inflammation. So as the inflammatory response gets compromised, a chain reaction of events can happen wherever our weakest link happens to be. So the best thing we can do for that is we can strengthen these pathways where information flows are occurring. And so Dr. Stephen Porges has said that 4 ways that are common across all, even in religious traditions, of doing that are: number 1, through posture, because even sitting up straight is going to stimulate the baroreceptors that wrap around the carotid arteries, which we're monitoring blood pressure. And the next is breathing, because that is going to send messages of rhythmicity from the abdomen and the diaphragm up to the brain, telling the parasympathetic nervous system everything's okay, you're safe, you're good. Vocalization, positive vocalization like singing or chanting.
Om, Brahmari.
Yep, speaking kind words as well.
Our
mantra will balance the tone of the vagus passing through the larynx. And the last is behavior. which are the yamas basically, and niyamas. So
social interaction, interpersonal neurobiology.
Appreciation, kindness, gratitude, things like that, all strengthen the vagal tone. So these are the four basic things. Posture, breathing, vocalization, and behavior all strengthen vagal tone. And when you look to the yoga practices, we use asanas as posture, we use pranayama for breathing, we use chanting mantras for vocalization, and we have yama and niyama for behavior.
Interpersonal.
Yeah, so all the first four limbs, what they do is they're directly impacting the vagal tone, those flows of information, so we can remain in a non-defensive state to access higher levels of brain activity, limbic system, and the cortical regions where we express compassion and empathy, so we can have fully coherent brain function rather than the fractured brain function that we quite often experience during the day.
So this is now being validated through, and you've all heard these words, neuroplasticity and epigenetics. So your vagus nerve, by the way, also gets information from your microbiome, which is 2 million extra genes that you have in addition to the 25,000 human genes that you got from your parents. Only 25,000 genes are human, 2 million to 20 million are bacterial, the microbiome. Technically speaking, we're all bacterial colonies, few human cells hanging on to these bacterial colonies. I like to think that we are the awakening of bacterial consciousness. Okay. So now, as I was looking at the other...
right now, that's more likely than the awakening of human consciousness.
That's right. It's so true. So as I was looking at the other cranial nerves, by the way, and I'm looking at all these other nerves, I'm realizing they all have bidirectional traffic. This whole idea that these are efferent and these are afferent is partially not true. You know, especially when we start looking at the nerves, there's information coming in, there's information backflow, there's a feedback, and there's self-regulation. And this is what is happening all the time, except we're interfering with it. And yoga is a way to actually accelerate that whole process of healing. The word healing comes from the word holy. Healing, holy, health, wholeness. Healing is the return of the memory of wholeness, and the 8 limbs are taking us there. Before we conclude with the higher consciousness, enlightenment, I hope we do, prana, it's such a commonly used word and misunderstood word. Vital energy, prana, breath, of course they're all related. And the 5 types of prana, and of course then the 5 types of prana have their subdivisions. It gets very complex if you want to be a scholar, but right now, practically speaking, you know, because this has to do with the bandhas and the kriyas and all these things which are part of our yoga practice. Can you say a little bit about prana?
Yeah, 2 words on prana.
And the 5 types.
Sure. So prana is, again, with every word in Sanskrit, it's made up of a bunch of different compounds. So pra means that which comes before, ana means breath, similar to asana. And that which comes before breath is the impulse to breathe, or the impulse to life, the impulse to manifestation. So the idea of breath is like, where does breath first start? Like when a baby is, you're a physician, you know, you probably delivered babies. Like, what causes something to breathe? Is it just atmospheric pressure, or is it something deeper than that? So
we are being breathed.
We are being breathed, exactly. And there has to be some impulse to cause that breathingness to happen. And so that impulse is called prana. Then we latch onto it and we think it's our own breath, and we start to form identities, because if we don't breathe for a few minutes, then we really feel that our identity is in compromise. And then breathe, please, quickly. So with prana, we have this idea of this impulse is an incoming nourishment to experience whatever we view of reality. So it's the incoming nourishment of experience. And then with every incoming nourishment, something has to leave also. So that leaving is called apana. That's what we don't need, or what we haven't digested. For every experience which we are bringing in, we have to assimilate it and digest it, and that's called samana. And then that assimilation of experience needs to be transported to every single cell in our body, so our whole body can have this unified assimilation of experience, whether it's food or something that happens to us, and that's called vyana, which is the spreading out of energy that's come in and assimilated. And then the last thing is we act on that in the world. We have to express it through either vocalization or through action or burping or coughing or whatever it comes out through the throat. And so that acting on is the udana, is the acting on.
So
This is a very general expression. There are a lot of ways of looking
prana,
at
you
it.
can think of breathing in.
Apana,
Apana,
breathing
out. Samana, digestion and metabolism.
Well, this is the
and assimilation, as you said.
This is oxygen exchange.
Oxygen exchange.
And also the balancing of blood pH.
Okay. And dhyana, the circulatory system, distribution. Yep. Udana is the upward, is the expression.
The expression, yeah.
Is the expression.
Yeah. And then the same as food, for experience, for everything. All these 5 pranas are in play for every aspect of our existence. Not just inhaling and exhaling.
Complete science of life, I would say. Complete science of existence. So that was my interview with you. Right. Where does this lead us to? Because the ultimate goal, I think, is, for lack of a better word, self-realization, freedom, moksha. Can we talk about the 4 goals of life very quickly, and then, you know,
Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha.
Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So these are in order, in sequence?
Yeah, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Go ahead.
Dharma is purpose and aligning the elements and forces in your own microcosm with the macrocosm. Artha, believe it or not, means material success, money. Don't be ashamed of making money. Kama is sensual pleasure, including sexuality. And moksha is freedom from all of it. Is it a good summary?
Yes, fabulous.
So let's go to moksha now.
Okay, good. I had a few questions for you. We have just 3 minutes.
So I can go 5 minutes.
We can go 5 minutes? Okay, first, when we were in India in February, you spoke about the Shiva Sutras, which is one of the ancient and important texts on Kashmiri Shaivism and about ultimate consciousness. I said to you after, we were going into Rishikesh that day, and I said, oh, there's a good bookstore in Rishikesh, I'm going to pick up a copy of the Shiva Sutras. And you said, oh, pick me up one too. So I did. And so I have a gift for you here, which is a copy of Jayadeva Singh's The Shiva Sutras.
Wow.
And so I just want to thank you in front of everybody to acknowledge that. Now, I know you have to listen to this for a minute. You know, we met in 2011, 2012 when I was just starting to get into doing research. And a lot of the people that you've introduced me to, including Neil Thies and Murali Doraiswamy and Subhash Kak and Don Hoffman, and what you've tutored me in and how you've mentored me through certain things, a whole lot of that has gone into the creation of that book and has really influenced my thought processes on the topics in there. And the end of the book...
May I say I love you?
Well, I love you as well, Deepak, I do. So I want to thank you for that mentorship and for that inspiration. And the final part where I talk about the kleshas existing in the brainstem, and the releasing of that, you'll have to read the book, I'm sorry, to get to that point. I remember I called you on the phone one day, and I was walking on Elizabeth Street, and I said, you know, I was having this thought about the kleshas existing in the brainstem and how, especially with the survival mechanisms of the brainstem, respiration and heart rate and digestion, sexual reproduction and sleep, these are all the things that the yogis were doing in their austerities to transcend. So I think the kleshas must be contained in our biology, and we can access higher states of consciousness by thinning the kleshas through physical practices. And you said, sounds good, you should write it up. And I did. So thank you.
How many people are familiar with this word klesha? Okay. So klesha is roughly translated as causes of human suffering, causes of human existential suffering. Animals are not subject to klesha. except in a very primitive form. But we, human beings, at some point, we want to know, why do we exist? What's the purpose of our existence? What is the meaning of death? Does God exist? Even if God exists, why should he care about a little microbe in a speck of dust in the junkyard of infinity if there are 2 trillion galaxies out there? So the 5 kleshas are, number 1, not knowing who you really are, confusing yourself with your self-image. Number 2, grasping and clinging at experience, because experience is transient, it happens. The experience that we're having now is be over in 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes, but it will be over. The experience of your body and your mind will be over one day. The third is similar, fear of impermanence. The fourth is being attached to the ego. And the fifth is the fear of death. And they're all interrelated. They're all totally interrelated. They're all connected. So the ultimate goal of our yoga practice is to transcend the kleshas while we are enjoying the experience. So the 4 goals we mentioned, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, sensual pleasure, sexual pleasure, all of that, making lots of money. If you repress that, it gets stronger. Try to repress anything, it gets stronger. Okay, it's the only cure is to ultimately transcend that by finding your true self, which is what yoga is about. Okay, so if I were to ask you a simple question right now, are you here right now? Are you here right now? Yes? Of course you're here. I hope you're here. Where are you? Okay, now I'm going to ask you the same question, but don't answer it till I raise my hand, okay? Are you here right now?
Yes.
So the first question is a thought. The answer is a thought. You are the awareness between thoughts. You are the awareness between perceptions. You are the awareness between every experience you have. That awareness, in its pure form, is not only the self of the individual, it's the self of the universe. When we enjoy experience, but at the same time we are not imprisoned by it, we have moved from karma to freedom. It's that simple. So I'm asking you again, are you here right now? Don't answer it. Just be aware of that which is listening. This still presence is your ticket to freedom. That's all. It's not that complicated.
It's just one simple thing.
One simple thing.
Thank you so much. For those of you joining us on Facebook, we are experiencing the joy of being here right now. And also at the Rubin Museum of Art, listening to Ashtanga Yoga teacher Eddie Stern with integrative medicine pioneer Dr. Deepak Chopra talking about, yes, one simple thing, the science of yoga. And this whole year at the Rubin, we're exploring the whole nature of power. And we've been exploring tonight the sort of power that we have within ourselves to actually forge change that can actually help us navigate what is outside these doors. And so now we're going to exchange a little bit of power to you to ask questions of these two gentlemen for the next 20 minutes or so. So if you have a question, and a nice succinct one would be great, just place your hand up and we'll try and get the microphone to you in good order. Yes, we have one in the first row, Lara. Thank you so much. Anybody else on that side of the house? Yes, right back there. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. So my question is related to how we can understand spiritual awakening through yoga, because I work with an organization that we basically train therapists and coaches and spiritual directors to work with people who are having usually spontaneous awakening experiences and have trouble integrating them, and they often get conflated with mental health. And as yoga is becoming more and more popular here, I think people are having these awakenings And I don't hear many studios talking about how we can address the needs. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that need or perhaps the science of awakening. Be curious to hear your thoughts.
Want to start?
You start.
That means that neither of us quite know what to say. No, it's a very good question, and I think that, and that's what people say when they don't know what to say also. It can be very difficult to integrate a new, we have filtration systems going full on all through the day, which are keeping us grounded in who we think we need to be to get the things done that we have to do. And when those filtration systems begin to be removed a little bit, we start to see things about ourselves or see the world in a way that we haven't seen before. And when those filtration systems become weakened or they get moved out of the way, it can be unsettling, it can be scary, it can be disorienting, and it can allow us to not know which narrative we should be holding on to. Should we struggle to recapture the narrative we had before where we weren't necessarily very happy, or should we try to stick with this newfound narrative which is a little maybe unsettling or ungrounded? And one of the things that can be helpful with this is to have a disciplined but not too intense practice of doing something physical, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or some exercise. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes people also need the support of therapy because there might be something else going on in their lives that is coming out from doing yoga. Traumatic incidences in early childhood or at any time in their lives that they're re-experiencing through yoga practices that make them think that they're having a spiritual experience where really they're having a trigger of a traumatic event. So sometimes therapy is needed in those situations, and I highly support that modality with yoga. Go ahead.
I'd like to support everything Eddie said. People are not clear about what spirituality is. So if you want to be very simple about it, spirituality is self-awareness, period. Mm-hmm. Self-awareness, period. Now when people start these practices, they're coming from where their conditioning is. Economic conditioning, cultural conditioning, religious conditioning, historical conditioning, etc. So each of them will have their own issues. Take them where they are in their practice. Somebody only wants to give up smoking. Let's pay attention to that. If they start to have awakening experiences and they're confused, tell them you're in a good group, a motley group of sages, psychotics, and geniuses. The only important people in the world. Okay, so you're in a good group. Don't worry. These are experiences that have occurred for thousands of years. And it's good that you're having this because you're tapping into what people know or call the unknown or the divine. And be with them at whatever stage they are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Next question.
Good evening, Dr. Chopra, and I'm sorry,
Eddie,
the
master.
The master. Thank you very much for your talk. I actually was not going to ask a question, except Dr. Chopra, I'm going to ask you specifically because at the very end, you were making a statement about awareness and then karma, and for whatever reason, it moved me to tears, and I don't understand what happened. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate just a bit, I know we're short for time, on what you were saying about the karma, so maybe I could do some research and do some introspection about that later on.
So karma is being imprisoned by or bound by experience. It's addiction. Karma is addiction. To be in a human body is to be addicted to some experience, always. Okay, whether it's physical, it's emotional, or it's psychological. And yet, our life is a continuum of experiences. So, in very simple terms, your life story is woven around karma, which is past experiences, conditioning your mind, memory, which is called vasana, sanskara, sorry. I'm sitting in front of a Sanskrit scholar. So sanskara is memory or the seed of memory, and then vasana is the seed of desire or intention. This, in simple terms, would be the software of your soul, the story of your life, the meaning, context, relationships, and the stories that govern your existence from birth to death. We are all prisoners of karma. All prisoners of karma. Don't think of it as bad, good, it's the conditioned mind. So Rumi has a beautiful poem. He says, why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? And the door is the door of pure awareness. That I can be aware of this experience and I can have the fullness of this experience. Whatever the experience is, I can be fully here for the experience and not be bound by it, not be imprisoned by it. So, which is the inherent nature of awareness? Awareness, right now when you feel your body or you think of a thought, it's just passing through on the screen of your awareness. But if you selectively get attached to it, then you have become karmically imprisoned or bound. And liberation is to have the fullness of experience in every moment and move on. Not the awareness of an experience is intrinsically free of the experience. Just remember this. The awareness of the thought is not a thought. Therefore, the awareness of a thought is intrinsically free of a thought. The awareness of a perception or any experience is not the experience. Therefore, it is inherently free of that experience. When I asked you to be aware, I said, are you here now? At that moment, you were free of karma. That moment. Make that your reference point.
So this is a perfect description of karma yoga, which is to do an action without the expectation of a result of that action. And what you just described is a perfect explanation of that.
And we at the Reuben have exactly the opposite of that. I don't know, if you haven't been here before, you should know that upstairs, up in the spiral galleries, there's all these other tools by which one can register being totally aware. And it's called art here in this culture. But they were, of course, functioning as meditation and awareness tools and not as cultural signifiers, of course, when they were created. But we have commissioned a wheel of intention at the base of the spiral staircase. And that wheel of intention is imitating the Tibetan prayer wheel in some form, because in the Tibetan prayer wheel you insert your prayers inside this barrel and you spin it, and that centrifugal energy, that force, generates that intention, that prayer out into the world and manifests it in some way. But with here, of course, it's digital.
So may I just say one more thing that came to my mind? So you've heard these words in Christian doctrine, I'm in the world and not of it. Or Teilhard de Chardin, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Or you can say, if you want to be hip, you can say we are non-local beings having a local experience in space and time. And Tim gave a beautiful quote last time on that. Would you repeat that? Or?
No, I can't, because you got the memory and I haven't.
So Tim was quoting one of the Upanishads. He says, space begins when we have a body. Time begins when we start thinking. Causality begins when we impose limitations. Freedom from karma is freedom from space-time and causality. Mm-hmm. That's the true self.
And the way Dr. Chopra is able to transmit that shows why he is always elected one of the most influential thinkers of our time, to transmit what is complex into such transparent simplicity. So that's the real treasure. So type in that intention in that wheel of intention tonight and spin it on the spiral staircase, and magic is going to happen. So who would like to raise a hand for the next two questions? Yes, right in the back. Thank you, Cecilia. Anybody else?
And there's
yes,
someone
right here.
Too.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Good, we'll come back to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is, what advice do you have for sharing these concepts and this information with young people and with children at a young age to start indoctrinating these concepts in their consciousness? Thank you.
I'm of the opinion that for young people, for kids, for youth, the best way to do any of the yoga things is just to play around with it. You shouldn't be too serious about the discipline of yoga until you really need it when you start to suffer when you get older. I think, generally speaking, the best thing we can try to teach our kids are to be kind and be thoughtful and to listen and to be creative and express themselves. And my mother and father are here, and what they told me all the time was, we, don't really care how well you do in school or in your life as long as you try really hard. And frankly, in school, I never tried all that hard. And I didn't do that well either. So both of those things came true. So those are my basic thoughts. I think all the general things that we would want a human being to grow into, we should encourage them to do that, and not to grow into miniature versions of ourselves. Because we, as we all know, I'm trying to find a word which is not an expletive, but we have a lot of problems, and we don't want to impose those things on the people that we're raising in the world, whether they're our own kids or other people's children as well. We've, over the years, I've done a lot of teaching in public education for kids, and one of the things that we've done over the years is we've removed the word yoga, meditation, and mindfulness from this completely, because yoga is a philosophy, and we don't want to impose those types of things on kids. What do we want them to? We want them to be able to self-regulate, to have emotional intelligence. And all of these things are sort of universal principles and practices that if you have a good tool, say breathing or pausing before you say something mean, these are simple things and they don't need to be called yoga. So the basic things I try to abide by.
But if you watch babies, they go spontaneously into asanas.
Yep.
So some of these asanas we call happy baby.
Exactly.
Right? Child pose.
So they're fun and they're natural.
They're fun and natural
and should
positions
not be
of awareness, and when they do them, encourage them and say, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Yes, fifth row, I think. Yeah, there you go. Hello.
Yeah, there was a question this young man has.
Yes, it will come to him. Yes, hello.
Hi. So I'm a novice when it comes to doing yoga, and I've heard from many people that people from India, when they see us doing yoga in the West, they make fun of us, saying that we're not doing it right or it's not the traditional. So I guess my question is, when you talk about the science of yoga, what type of yoga are you talking about? And how do we know we're doing it right? And I think you might have spoke about it earlier about.
Actually, I would say that there are more yogis, authentic yogis in New York City right now than in most of India, so don't buy that. There were luminaries in India, but you can't say gravity belongs to the English.
Gravity belongs to Newton.
If it's a science and it works, it belongs to everyone.
Yes, hello.
So I think I am speaking as one of the youngest people in the audience and a student and someone going through what Eddie mentioned as those more tumultuous times. And I was someone who discovered yoga very unusually, sort of organically. Neither of my parents had any sort of spiritual practices, and I wasn't really exposed to any formal teaching. I just sort of discovered movement, entered the world of personal training, and then transitioned into my current career as a storyteller and journalist. And through a lot of my interactions with my classmates, my peers, I see a lot of the effects of mass media and the imposition and certainly the inflammations that they experience trying to differentiate themselves from their peers, and they feel this inherent pressure to do so. And the ones that I see that are most successful are the ones that are able to reduce that inflammation. And I try and encourage my younger colleagues, and also try and encourage myself every once in a while to reduce that inflammation. And I was wondering if there was anything that you would especially recommend for other young people like myself as maybe a jumping off point. Certainly you speak in the book about your nutritional practices, your breathing practices, but maybe just some guiding thoughts for those who are a little more pressured, especially as millennials, Gen Z, so on, to try and maybe step away from what is the predominant culture?
Okay. I'll say if I had to pick one practice to do I was stuck on a desert island and I was only allowed to do one practice for the rest of my life, I would do something called resonant breathing, which is where you inhale and exhale for an equal length and you slow the ratio of your breath down to about 5 to 7 breaths per minute. Normally we breathe between 15 to 18 breaths per minute. In resonant breathing, you slow it down in half. And what this does is it brings the sympathetic and parasympathetic into a perfect equilibrium. And at that point, the homeostatic functions of the body begin to reset, and it has a chain reaction through the rest of our physiology. I find it the single most effective, easy, simple, straightforward practice to do. You can do it for 5 or 10 minutes a day, and that's pretty much enough. And anything else after that is like an added benefit. But the resonant breathing I find to be really the most effective. And with the Ujjayi breathing, quote-unquote Ujjayi breathing, which is done during the asana practice, your inhale and exhale are supposed to be equal also, and you're also supposed to slow your breath down gradually to a very slow rate. When Tibetan monks and yogis were brought into research centers and wired up and measured while they were meditating, one of the things the researchers noticed was that their breathing cycle, or their breath cycle, slowed down to 5 to 7 breaths per minute naturally, no matter what meditation practice they were doing. And so through doing this resonant breathing, slowing the breath down to that cycle, we also enter naturally into a meditative state without trying to meditate. So many people say, I've tried meditation, I can't meditate, or I don't like it. I know I should, but I hate it. Doing this kind of a breath cycle is a way of meditating without meditating.
And there's an app for that.
There is.
Okay. It's called the Breathing app.
Yep. And it's free.
And it's free.
I see 130 of you holding a book like this in your lap right now. So that means we'll want to give time for Eddie to sign all these copies afterwards. So we've got time for maybe 2 more questions in this room. But of course, as you meet with Eddie, you'll be able to ask your own questions directly. So we've got a question right in the first row. Anybody else? This is your last opportunity. We'll come to that. Yes, hello.
What are your thoughts about the use of psychedelics?
My parents are here, so.
I think under supervision, with a guide, and with ritual, they have tremendous value. Because they make you question your habitual certainties. And occasionally transcend. We started, both of us, our journey. Would you say that in front of your parents?
I'd even say it in front of my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, I had tremendous value in some early psychedelic experiences with LSD and with mushrooms. But around the same time, I started learning about yoga and meditation and discovered from the readings I was doing that the states I had experienced from psychedelics were the same states being described in the yoga text. And I thought, I can do this without having to take anything external. I don't have to feel terrible the next day. I don't have to destroy my brain cells. I don't have to spend money. All positive things as far as I was concerned. And so I stopped doing everything and only did yoga, and decided, fairly soon that yoga was something that I could practice once or twice a day with great results and great benefits. But psychedelics are not something you can practice twice a day. It doesn't work like that, and it's not good for you. And also they stop working. But yoga and meditation pretty much never stop working. But anything which is playing with your brain chemistry after a while is going to stop working or have a bad effect.
There are a lot of people watching us now on Facebook, and they're questioning what we're saying. So I would say selectively there's a very good reason to use them selectively. It opens the window, but it's not a solution.
Dr. Deepak Chopra and Eddie Stern are not condoning or endorsing the use of psychedelics, any other psychoactive substances.
Don't feel guilty if you've tried.
Dr. Chopra, a question for you then. We've got Dr. Jill Blakeway coming in 10 days' time to talk about energy medicine, particularly acupuncture, which draws upon a tradition north of the Himalayas. Acupuncture and yoga, do they go hand in hand?
Oh yeah, acupuncture, marma therapy, any of the energy therapies, Reiki, and the martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong, these are all actually mind-body techniques to get to the same place.
And they don't, if you practice them both at the same time, they don't actually counter each other?
Not at all.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Great. So see you all here on April the 10th. Yes, our final question, I guess, in the second row. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much. In my own work, the last 3 years, I've had to study quite a bit about climate change. And I have been trying to take this very dire news in deeply. I think I have taken it in quite deeply over the last 3 years, and it's not easy at all. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Thank you. Great question.
One word that would summarize all the suffering in the world right now, collective suffering, is inflammation. Our minds are inflamed, our bodies are inflamed, our brain is inflamed, our behavior is inflamed, eco-destruction is a result of inflammation, climate change is a result of inflammation in our body-mind system. So unless we have a spiritual shift, unless we can see that those trees are our lungs, unless we can see that the air is our breath and the earth is recycling as our body, and the rivers and waters are our circulation, and stars are molecules and atoms in our body, that we have a personal body, we have a universal body, they're both equally ours, that shift is not going to happen. It has to be a spiritual shift, number one. Number two, technologies already exist. We changed the way we do agriculture, we changed the way we produce food, we harness wind and solar energy, we harness tidal waves, and we can get there. But there has to be collective intent, and there has to be collective shift. That's why these conversations are so important. If it happens, we'll be redeemed. If it doesn't, then the human experiment will have failed, and it's okay. Nature will come up with something else.
And
it might be without us, but it might come up with something else.
Huh? What did you say?
No, I said it might be without us, but it might come up with something else.
Yeah. The human experiment is an interesting experiment. It's not the only experiment that the universe is up to.
And Eddie's first appearance here was in a series in 2015 when we were exploring the whole notion of karma and climate change. And you were on stage with Chris Martin, weren't you, Eddie? So it was really great to have you back. I lied. We have one other question in the house. Hello.
Hi, thank you both so much. This was really informative and very inspiring. I have the privilege of teaching yoga to veterans, so there's a lot I'm excited to take with me in my class on Wednesday morning. So we've talked a lot, or you both have talked a lot about like the individual aspect of yoga. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the collective aspect, so whether you think there's any benefit when you have bodies in a room practicing together as opposed to practicing alone.
Yes, definitely. When you have, as Jesus said, when you have two or more gathered together in my name, then I'm present with you. And what this means is a magnification of energy. So when like-minded people get together and they do a like-minded practice, not just for themselves, but for the feeling that they are doing it for the collective, then that energy begins to collect, develop, and have a rippling out effect. So practicing yoga by yourself is very important because you develop discipline, and inward focus, and you learn things about yourself. But practicing in groups of people means that you're magnifying the power of the practices that you're doing. And whatever those practices are, whether they're forgiveness practices, compassion practices, concentration practices, physical practices that have a sense of healing about them, the energy of the collective gets magnified. And the same way that we have any group think that can go negative or a group think that can go positive, Yoga should be a positive group think that sends us forward in these positive directions towards all the things that we mentioned: love, compassion, understanding, listening, inward listening and outward listening as well. And all of those together lead towards creating a healing environment. And so then when others come into that circle, they also can experience the impact of that healing environment and that energetic level too. So both are very important to do, I think.
So tonight, Eddie demonstrated probably the greatest essence of humanity. And that wasn't necessarily doing a breathing exercise with us all, or telling us about an asana, although those are part of it. He gave a gift to Deepak. It was love. And we need to show, and happily show, these two great teachers some love too, in the form of a gift. And, you know, Deepak's already a major icon in our culture, but I hope he understands when we give him an iconette, very small, very potent, in the form of Ganesh, who, with his consumption of sweet things, is truly bringing the awakening of the bacterial consciousness into the world, riding on the back of a mouse from darkness into light. And of course, Eddie with his new book and, quite frankly, 30 years under his belt as a yoga practitioner and teacher will get one too. So here we go, these little Ganeshi to Deepak Chopra and Eddie Stern. Congratulations and thank you both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.